Hello all, I Neeraj Kabra, on behalf of Law Chamber of Siddharth Murarka, welcome you all to our new webinar. Today we have speaker, Advocate Ashish Chavan. He will be enlightening us on today's topic, that is appeal and revision in CRPC. I request sir to kindly take over and start with his lecture.
Thank you so much, and a good evening to all of you. This is really a lucky day for me because this is the third occasion that I'm feeling proud and privileged to be associated with this platform, the Law Club, which is hosted by my very good friend and colleague, Siddharth Murarka. So before I start, I must share these a few thoughts with you because this is the third time that I'm having this conversation. We started off probably in the first week of March, if I'm not wrong. And Siddharth called me and said, "Sir, there's this new concept of a webinar." So I was wonderstruck, because this was just lockdown 1.0, and everybody was, wondering what will happen next. And everybody in our profession was also at a crossroads as to, how will the profession now develop in view of the fact that this whole problem has arisen and this invisible enemy has surrounded us from all sides. So I was wondering, what is this webinar, and will really people listen to a webinar? Would they be really interested in hearing to somebody who speak on a screen? And then one to another, to one of the webinars, and then around me I started to see that there was a gradual change in the way our profession was meeting the demands and the challenges thrown by this invisible enemy. So I thought, I looked around, I saw slowly the courts were adapting themselves. The honorable judges were issuing new guidelines, refining them. Everybody has teething troubles. So is the case with adapting to this kind of a scenario. But then from then on till now, I can see quite a leap that our profession has taken. And it's very heartening to note. It's really a pleasant surprise, because we are always criticized as being somebody who are rooted in old times, antiquity, and would love to remain there. So it is a really wonderful thing when I see around me, slowly new codes are being evolved, new dress codes are evolved. Yesterday only I heard that the Supreme Court has come out with an e-filing module. So gradually we are seeing a lot of upbeat optimism, and lockdown 4.0 is, I think, one message, one mantra that it has given us is that we have to live with this corona. So if you have to live with the situation around us, then we will have to have an uneasy peace or maybe an uneasy alliance with the whole thing around us. And I'm sure as professionals, we will rise up to the challenge. We have already risen up to the challenge. And from the struggling days of just having a few webinars here and there, now we are having full-fledged virtual hearings, virtual courts, and slowly, I'm sure that things will return to normal. And it will be a new normal, of course, but we will certainly come back with a lot of positivity and strength. With these few words, I would now switch over to what I intend to speak to you for today. Initially, the plan was to speak on appeals and revisions in CRPC. But when I looked at the vastness of both these topics, and I looked at case law, and I looked at how I will be able to do justice in an hour's time, I firmly felt that I should restrict myself to appeals. So probably, it's a hint for my friend Mr. Murarka, who can probably accommodate me some other time when I would like to talk about revisions. But today we will talk about appeals, especially in CRPC. So without further ado, we will start off. Now we will see that chapter 29 of the Code of Criminal Procedure is that chapter which deals with appeals. Okay. Without going into the broader probabilities, we will go into the sections and we will see what each section says. So the first section is section 372. Basically what it does, it provides for statutory appeal. So there we have the golden principle that no judgment or order of any criminal court can be appealed against unless it is specifically provided either in the CRPC or any other law. So to cut the jargon, basically what it says is that unless there is a specific provision which provides that a particular judgment can be appealed, it cannot be appealed. So if you are saying that a particular judgment, you are questioning yourself as to whether a particular judgment can be appealed or not, the only simple answer is please look at the CRPC or any other law applicable. If there is a statutory appeal provided, then yes, you can appeal. If it does not provide for any statutory appeal, no, then you cannot appeal. So it's a very, very simple. So next we have, this is a broad overview that I have tried to take of all the sections in chapter 29. So we saw 372, then 373 to 380. They deal with against which orders or judgments appeals can be. Then 373 basically deals with appeals from orders requiring security or refusal to accept or reject surety for keeping peace or good behavior. So these are basically another chapters in CRPC where in certain cases people are required to give the security to the district magistrate or executive magistrates or ACPs, or there might be a refusal to accept or reject the surety for keeping of peace. So basically this is arising from chapter proceedings, and any appeal which arises from chapter proceedings is covered by section 373. Now, what are these chapter proceedings? That is another topic for maybe for another lecture. But right now, what I can tell you is under section 117 of CRPC, there may be a time when somebody needs to give a security for keeping the peace. Somebody means an accused. Now, if that accused is aggrieved by that order under 117 of CRPC, he can file an appeal. Now, where can he file that appeal? We'll just go back a little and see. So appeals against orders under 117 to give security for keeping the peace, or alternatively, accepting the surety. Now, where does that normally happen? As practicing lawyers, we know that magistrates accept or refuse to accept a surety. So when you have a situation where there is a bail and you need to give surety and you provide a surety, the magistrate may say, no, I don't accept that surety. That surety is not credible enough or not solvent enough for me. But you sincerely feel that yes, the surety is there and perhaps the order of the learned magistrate is wrong. Then where do you challenge it? So you challenge it under section 373, obviously to the higher court in the hierarchy. Then we come to the next topic, which is appeals from convictions. So we saw all these, the first set of sections. Now it is 374, which is dealing with appeals from convictions. Now this is a rough hierarchy. Any person convicted by the High Court may appeal to Supreme Court. However, there are very rare cases where a person will be convicted by the High Court, because the High Court is not the original court of jurisdiction so far as criminal law is concerned. So in a very rare situation, you may have a trial in the High Court and the High Court may convict somebody. That's a very rare situation, but anyway, it is provided for in the statute books. It says any person convicted by the High Court may appeal to Supreme Court. Any person convicted by the Sessions Court may appeal to the High Court. Any person convicted by any other court. Now, any other court in this situation would mean what? It would mean the Metropolitan Magistrate Court or JMFC, in which a sentence of more than 7 years has been passed, may appeal to the High Court. Any person convicted by a magistrate may appeal to a Sessions Court. Now, these are more or less like rules. There is no real explanation to be done. So this is basically something that we must understand. So from where the appeals arise is provided under section 374. Now, any person who is aggrieved by an order to release on probation under section 360 may appeal to the Sessions Court. Now we know that sometimes some accused are released on probation instead of being convicted or sentenced to imprisonment. They are released on probation. Now that is under section 360. If you are aggrieved with that, you may appeal to the Sessions Court. So if a magistrate is releasing the accused on probation under 360, then one may appeal to Sessions Court. And if the Sessions Court is doing so, then one may appeal to the High Court. Importantly, no appeal in cases where accused pleads guilty. Now, what is this? If a person pleads guilty, then there can be no appeal. Now, this is very important, especially for practicing lawyers. You should be very, very vigilant. And if you're representing somebody, then it would be all the more necessary for you to be even more vigilant, because your accused or your client cannot be pleading guilty and then saying that he has pleaded guilty by mistake. So you should be careful. Of course, there are dozens of judgments of the Apex Court as well as the Bombay High Court, where the accused has not been represented by anybody. Obviously, then he was not aware of the implications of what he was doing, and he has pleaded guilty just because somebody has told him to do so, or he was overawed by the atmosphere of the court, etc., etc. Then, of course, the situation will be different. But knowingly, consciously, once a person pleads guilty, then there can be no appeal. Except, now there's an exception, except as to the legality or extent of the sentence, because that is not in your hands. In your hands or in the accused hands, it is only to plead guilty. Then the judge may either pronounce a sentence and he may pronounce the quantum of that sentence. Now, the extent of the sentence and the legality. So whether the sentence is or the punishment is legal or not, and to what extent was the sentence correct or not, that can be only challenged if the person has pleaded guilty. Otherwise, there is no appeal. Now, section 376, if you read it in CRPC, there are a lot of cases which have been set out. Now, I have not gone into those small cases because it would take up a lot of our time. And it is really not relevant, because if you look at the CRPC, the answer is self-explanatory. Those cases you can see for yourselves, you just have to open 376. Now, what does this section do? It sets out cases where the sentence is considered to be petty. Petty means insignificant, not very significant, not where the gravity of the offense is very high. And therefore, the law postulates that there is no appeal that can lie against these petty cases. The idea or the legislative intent behind all this is to prevent a flooding of the appellate courts by appeals in each and every case. Otherwise, what would happen? For every small petty case, there would be n number of appeals, and ultimately the appellate courts will be flooded. So there is something which is called as a petty cases. You will need to check out section 376 and see, because it's an exhaustive list of petty cases which is given. So you can see in which cases and in which instances no appeal would lie. Now we come to the more, we have section 337, which is appeal by state government against sentence. So normally in a state case, who would be the entity which would be entitled to file a case in case of a conviction or an acquittal? In a state case, it would be the state government. Now, there are three parts. The first is that the state government may direct the public prosecutor, we all know who the public prosecutor is, to present an appeal against a conviction by any court except the High Court for inadequacy of sentence. So first you have the concept of inadequacy of sentence. Means that it is in normal language or legal parlance, we call it enhancement of sentence. So that the sentence, let us say, is of 4 years. You feel it is inadequate. You approach the state government may direct the public. You is here the complainant. So the state government may direct the public prosecutor to present an appeal for inadequacy or to enhance the sentence, that the sentence is not adequate enough. The second situation is to the sessions court if the sentence is passed by the magistrate. So if the magistrate passes the, so now we are dealing with inadequacy of sentence only, and this is A, B, C within it. So we are looking at a situation where the state government has filed an appeal against a conviction because the conviction was for a lesser period or for a lesser number of years, and the state feels that it should be for a more number of years. So where does the appeal lie? In case the sentence is passed by magistrate, it lies to the sessions court. In case sentence is passed by the sessions court, it lies to the High Court. Now, the second section or subsection 2 says that subsection 1 applies to the central government in place of the state government. So just replace the word state government instead of central government. So instead of, so in point number 2, all that you need to do is to replace the word state government with central government. and this is applicable to any offense investigated by the central agencies. Now, what are central investigation agencies? The CBI is one of them. Enforcement Directorate is one of them. National Investigating Agency or NIA is one of them. So instead of the state government, we have a situation where the central government appoints a public prosecutor. Now all other things are the same. So A and B would be same to point number 2 also. Now, when an appeal is filed by the state or central government, the court shall not enhance the sentence without giving an accused the reasonable opportunity of showing cause against such enhancement. These are the principles of natural justice. So obviously, when an appeal is filed by the state or central government, the court is going to hear, it has to give a reasonable opportunity to the accused to show cause as to why the sentence should not be enhanced. Now, please remember that we are dealing with enhancement of sentence, because if we go back 2 slides, we will see what is all of this. It is for inadequacy of sentence. So please remember that part of it. So this is about inadequacy of sentence. So whether the sentence is sufficient or not. Then the second part, or rather the third part, which is the appeal against acquittal. Now, who will file an appeal against acquittal? Let us say in a state case, on a police case, the accused is acquitted. Now, the complainant or the first informant, however we call it, sometimes the word complainant and first informant is synonymous, sometimes it is not. But the complainant or the victim, again, victim is a very specific word. So let us stick with the word first informant. So the first informant may want to file the case against, or rather he might want to file an appeal against because he's aggrieved. But in this section, section 378, we are going to look at the appeals which are preferred by the government or the state. Okay, now we have 1A and 1B. What does 1A say? It is the appeal by the state government against acquittal by a magistrate in respect of cognizable and non-bailable offence. It lies to the sessions court through the public prosecutor. Okay. The second is 1B, appeal by state against acquittal by any other court other than the High Court. So obviously what it means is sessions court. Lies to the High Court through the public prosecutor. So simplifying it, point number A says that if there is an acquittal by a magistrate in case of non-bailable and cognizable offence, where does the appeal lie? The appeal lies to the sessions court through the public prosecutor. And if the acquittal is by a sessions court, where does it lie? It lies to the High Court, to the public prosecutor. Now, please remember, these are state appeals. These are appeals where the state government decides to file an appeal against acquittal. There is a occasion one of the aggrieved parties. But here is a state appeal. Okay. Now, both these 1A and 1B were added to the statute in 2006. Earlier, there was a different situation. Now, if the acquittal arises out of an offence investigated by a central investigating agency like the CBI or the NIA or the Enforcement Directorate, we saw those investigating agencies just a minute ago. Now, the principles of 1A and 1B will apply pari materia. Means what? That if there is an acquittal arising out of an offence investigated by either CBI or NIA or ED or any such investigating agency under a central act, the whatever is stated in 1A and 1B will remain the same. Only what you have to do is you have to replace state government with the central government. Okay, now this is very easy to understand. Now in subsections 1 and 2, no appeal to the High Court can be entertained except with the leave of the court. So in a state appeal against acquittal, if the state has to file an appeal, it straight away can't file an appeal to the High Court. Now this is applicable to the High Court, not to the Sessions Court. So it is, so supposing an appeal has to be filed to the High Court, it can be entertained subject to the leave of the court. So normally there is a separate application that one makes when one files such kind of appeals to the High Court, which is a separate application with a prayer which says that please give me permission or a special leave to file this appeal. Only when the High Court hears you on that appeal and feels that yes, there is a prima facie case where the permission should be granted to let you file that appeal, only then can that appeal be filed. So this is important. So this is state appeal against acquittal in short. Okay. Now we move on to a private. What does a private person do? Now in a complaint case, let us take the example of a section 138 case, a check bouncing case. You are a complainant in the Negotiable Instruments Act case, and unfortunately there is an acquittal of the accused. What do? The 378 subsection 4 gives you the answer. Appeal lies against acquittal lies only to the High Court, and special leave to appeal is mandatory. So in the case of a complainant case, the earlier case we saw was a state case and a police case. Here we are seeing a complainant's case, which is a private case. For example, section 138, for example, section 500. These are private cases. So in that scenario, appeal lies to the High Court only, and the special leave to appeal is mandatory. Okay. Now the limitation for filing application for grant of leave. Now we saw what is grant of leave. The limitation for filing this application for grant of leave is 60 days, except where the complainant is a public servant, where it is for 6 months. So this is a simple limitation clause. Now, section 380 speaks of some special right of appeal. Basically, what it says is that when there are more than one persons who are convicted in one trial, let us say there are 4 persons convicted in one trial, it is not necessary that all 4 compulsorily have to file an appeal, or they have a right of appeal, or it is not that the law will hear them only when all 4 come together and file an appeal. Any one or all, so it could be all or any one, have a right of appeal, and that whatever is the decision of that appeal would also bind the remaining people who are convicted. So that's a special right of appeal. Then you have section 382. Important, not otherwise be exceeding time. So this is a very important thing. Petition of appeal. Normally we also call it a memo of appeal. What the law says, section 382 to be precise, says it shall be in the form of a petition in writing and accompanied by the copy of judgment which is appealed against. So these are the 3 things which are necessary in a petition for appeal. Now 384 and 385 deal with the procedure for hearing appeals, which is actually very relevant and practically important for us as lawyers. What does 384 and 385 say? After examining the appeal, if the court finds that there is no sufficient ground for interfering, it can dismiss the appeal summarily. So this is the first filtration. So this is like a filtration plant. The court will see that whether your appeal makes sufficient ground or not. If it makes a sufficient ground, then it will pass that filter. Otherwise, the High Court or whichever appellate court will simply dismiss the appeal summarily. It will not give you any opportunity. It will dismiss the appeal summarily. But now there is a caveat here. Before summary dismissal, the court shall give the appellant a reasonable opportunity of being heard. So this is what defines that 384 and 385. So no summary dismissal can happen unless and until you get an opportunity, a reasonable opportunity of being heard. Now what happens if it is not summarily dismissed? So your appeal has crossed the first hurdle. It is not summarily dismissed. The court finds that there is some merit in it. Then what will happen? It will issue a notice of hearing to the appellant or the pleader or the complainant. Now complainant happens in which case 378(4), where you have a private case and it is instituted upon a complaint and you are filing it in the High Court arising out of a acquittal. Okay. Court shall call the record of the trial and hear the parties. Now this is again a mandate of law that during the time of final hearing, this is what we popularly call as a final hearing, because if you see A and B, this is the admission and C is the final hearing, because now there is a notice of hearing. This hearing is obviously the final hearing, and in the final hearing normally in an appeal the record of the trial is called for and examined. Okay. Now powers of the appellate court. What powers does the appellate court have? If there is no ground for interfering, the court may dismiss the appeal. It is very easy to understand. Then In an appeal from acquittal, what can be done? Now, this is very interesting because this will give us the scope and parameters of what a court can do when faced with an appeal from acquittal. So it can either reverse the order, okay, direct that a further inquiry be made, or order a retrial. So there are three things: reverse the order of acquittal, direct a further inquiry to be made, or order a retrial, or find the appellant guilty and pass sentence in accordance with law. This is what can happen in an appeal against acquittal. In an appeal from conviction, what can happen? Either acquit or discharge the accused. So instead of convicting the accused, the conviction is overturned and the accused is acquitted or discharged. Or a retrial can be ordered, the same as above. Alter the finding while maintaining the sentence. So let us say the sentence is of 3 years imprisonment, but the finding is that the person is convicted in X under X provision of law. So that finding can be altered, but the sentence of imprisonment of the same number of years can be continued. One scenario. Second scenario, alter the nature or extent of the sentence without enhancing the sentence. So supposing it is simple imprisonment, it can be rigorous imprisonment. The nature of the sentence is enhanced. The extent of the sentence can be enhanced without enhancing the sentence. So I can't say in an appeal from conviction, the sentence cannot be enhanced. It can be modified. It can the finding can be altered. Sentence is maintained. The nature of the sentence can be changed. All right, and that is why in the last they say in an appeal for enhancement of sentence, obviously it is by state, because no other person can file an appeal for enhancement. Either the accused is acquitted or discharged, or a retrial. So if you notice that acquittal, discharge and retrial keeps on occurring again and again. See, let's go back and see that. In an appeal from conviction, acquittal, discharge, retrial. Now here, appeal for enhancement of sentence, acquittal, discharge, retrial. So it keeps on recurring. Alter the finding while maintaining the sentence, again. Either enhance. Now here obviously the appeal is for enhancement. So either the court can enhance the sentence, that is add to the sentence, increase the sentence, or reduce the sentence, provided that the sentence shall not be enhanced unless the accused has had an opportunity of showing cause against the enhancement. So obviously again the principles of natural justice are followed. Now a very interesting section, which is section 389. We come across this very often as practicing lawyers. 389 says that pending an appeal, the appellate court suspends the execution of the sentence and releases the convicted appellant on bail or bonds if he is in custody. So the appellate court has a power to suspend the execution of the sentence pending an appeal. So you file an appeal before a superior court or the appellate court. It can suspend the execution of the sentence, and what else can it do? It can release the convicted person on bail or bonds, okay, if he is in custody. This has to be a reasoned order and the necessary to record the reasons in writing. Now, in case of offences punishable with death or imprisonment for life or 10 years and more, the court shall give an opportunity to the public prosecutor for showing cause in writing opposing the bail. So now these are serious offences. If you look at the nature of the offences, they are punishable with death, life or 10 years and more. Obviously, the court being seized of a serious offence has to give an opportunity to the public prosecutor for showing cause in writing why he is opposing the bail, if at all he is opposing the bail. If the convicted person is sentenced to imprisonment for up to 3 years, or the offence itself is bailable. Now these are the two prerequisites. Either the imprisonment is up to 3 years, not more, but up to 3 years, 3 years or less, or 3 years, or the offence itself is bailable. Now, which are the offences which you can normally think of which are bailable? Section 138, simple example. Section 138, the maximum imprisonment is up to 3 years in fact, and the offence itself is bailable. And if your accused is on bail, then the trial court may release the convict on bail and give him sufficient time to file an appeal. So earlier first two sections dealt with the appellate court. Now we are dealing with the trial court. You have a situation where in a particular case, let us say your accused is sentenced to 2.5 years, 2 years and some months of imprisonment. The offense is not bailable because there is an or here. So offense is not bailable, but the accused is sentenced for some imprisonment which is less than 3 years. What will happen? You can file a bail application for him. The court will grant him bail, and not only will it grant him bail, it will also give him sufficient time to file an appeal. Normally this time is the appeal period. So it could be 60 days, 90 days, whatever the limitation, according to the limitation of the appeal. And the sentence will be deemed to be suspended during this time. Okay, so this is a facility that you get if the imprisonment is for up to 3 years or the offense is bailable. And this facility you can get in the trial court itself. Okay, now section 390, which is the arrest of accused in appeal from acquittal. Now there is an appeal against acquittal. The appeal is admitted. At the time of admission, normally the High Court initiates proceedings under section 390. Now what is the purpose of these proceedings? It is to secure the presence of the accused, because ultimately the accused is today not on any bond. He is acquitted. He can roam around here and there. He may make himself not available to the law. He may just disappear from somewhere. And so to secure his presence, it is necessary to issue a bailable or a non-bailable warrant. And that is done under section 390. Now this is an extremely rarely used section, because in my limited understanding, I have not found a lot of cases where there has been actually further evidence which has been led or asked to be led by the appellate court. But nevertheless, this section does exist. Section 391, used very sparingly, I can say. So at the time of the hearing of any appeal, either it can be against a conviction or acquittal, the appellate court may, if it thinks fit, record additional evidence, either itself or direct the magistrate or sessions court, as the case may be. Now this order needs to be a reasoned order. So what basically it says is that additional evidence can be recorded by either that court, appellate court, or the magistrate court or the sessions court, as the case may be. So this order needs to be a reasoned order. Okay, now this is, as I told you, a very sparingly used provision of law. At the time of the evidence, the accused has a right to remain present. Now, what happens when the High Court judges are equally divided? Let us say in a case where there is a appeal either against a conviction or even against an acquittal. Acquittal is rare. In a division bench, normally appeal against conviction comes up, and there is Justice A and Justice B, both comprising of the Honorable Division Bench, but both are equally divided in their opinion. Then what happens? The law says that section 392 of CRPC says that the appeal along with both the opinions, so the opinion of Justice A and the opinion of Justice B, has to be led before a single judge, and he will decide the issue, and that is considered as a final. Now, what are the parameters? Now, this is very interesting, because this is basically culled from various judgments. So what are the parameters for appeal against acquittal? We know largely the parameters for dealing with cases of conviction or other appeals against conviction. But when you look at acquittals or appeal against acquittals, they can be reversed for very substantial and compelling reasons. So this is one of the observations of the Honorable Supreme Court. The other observation is the presumption of innocence in favor of accused is further strengthened by the judgment of the court, which had the opportunity to hear the evidence and see the witnesses. Hence, the appellate court should be cautious in disturbing a finding of acquittal. See, what happens in an acquittal is already there is a presumption of innocence in favor of the accused. Now, that is further strengthened because the court, which has the opportunity of hearing the evidence and it has come to a finding after considering all these aspects, and therefore there is a warning note sounded. The appellate court should be cautious in disturbing a finding of acquittal, especially in this scenario. Now, one more proposition is if two reasonable conclusions are possible on the basis of the evidence on record, okay, one favoring the accused and one against him. Now, there are two equally possible conclusions. Then what does the appellate court do in an appeal against acquittal? It should not disturb the finding of acquittal recorded by the trial court. So if you read these three propositions, in conjunction, the two things that can come out is that that it is very difficult to dislodge a view taken by a judge in an appeal against acquittal. There has to be very substantial and compelling reasons, and there must be clear perversity of justice, miscarriage of justice, which has to be shown. Only then can there be a situation where appeal against acquittal can be successful. And the reasons are there, the propositions of law we have seen. So now we come to a very important amendment which happened in 2008. And what is the impact of that amendment overall on the appeals? Now in 2008, what happened was there was an amendment which was carried out wherein a proviso was added to section 372. Now 372, if you see at the very beginning of my talk, I had given section 372, which is basically nothing but statutory appeal. There can be no appeal unless provided for, basically. And there is a proviso now which has come in 2008. Now this amendment has got far-reaching consequences. Why? Because it creates also the definition of victim, not in section 372, somewhere else in CRPC. That somewhere else is section 2, subsection WA. So section 2, subsection WA of CRPC now defines a victim, okay, as a person who has suffered any loss or injury caused by reason of the act or omission for which the accused person has been charged. So, practically speaking, a guardian, a legal heir, a next of kin of the person who has suffered a loss of injury or injury, basically can be a victim. So, can a complainant be a victim? In certain situations, yes. Can a first informant be also a victim? Yes. But can there be other victims apart from a first informant? Yes. For example, take the case of fire by arson. Let us say some accused is being prosecuted for throwing fire or making fire or creating fire and setting on fire different houses at the same time. So there is somebody who is the first informant, somebody who has seen this happening, or somebody who is also one of the members of that house which was burnt down. But there could be other victims, there could be other people whose houses have been burnt down. So now we understand that victims can be separate and distinct from the complainant. They could also be a complainant in a given situation. It could also include the guardian of that person or the legal heir of the person. So a victim's definition, according to me, is very, very vast. It covers a lot of entities and people. Now, what does this proviso, which has come about in 2008, what does it say? That a victim has a right to file an appeal. Now, let us pause here. Right to file an appeal against any acquittal. So that is one. Again, we pause. Or conviction for a lesser offense. Again, we pause. Or inadequate compensation. Now, here we pause for a little more time. Again, we look at it. Proviso to section 372 states that a victim has a right to file an appeal against any acquittal or conviction for lesser offense. So, we look at the first situation of acquittal. So, if there is an acquittal, a victim has a right to file an appeal, correct? Or if there is a conviction for a lesser offense against the victim has a right to file an appeal, correct? Or if there is inadequate compensation given to that person, again the victim has a right to file an appeal. So a victim has a right to file an appeal only in these three situations. And those situations are very clear in front of us. And where does he file his appeal? He files his appeal to that court to which an appeal ordinarily lies against an order of conviction. So supposing the acquittal has happened in a magistrate court, where will he go and file this appeal? He will go and file this appeal in the Sessions Court. If it has happened in Sessions Court, where will he go? To the higher court, that is the High Court. Okay. Now, please remember these three conditions because they are going to come we have to understand how this law has evolved and how a victim has a standalone right or an independent right apart from the complainant. Prior to the amendment, now why did the amendment come into being in the first place? See, the victims of offences in police cases had to be at the mercy of the state. So supposing a person loses his brother, let us say it's a case of murder. His brother is no longer there. He's been murdered by somebody. And the case goes on, at the end of which there is an acquittal. The accused gets acquitted. Now, the person who is the next of the kin, let us say the person who may be the first informant, or maybe just the brother of that person who's lost his life. Now, he is a victim, correct? Has to be a victim. So he has to be, first of all, within the category of a victim. Now, earlier, what used to happen is they used to run from pillar to post, the victims or the complainants or the first informants. They used to run from pillar to post in trying to convince the state machinery that there was a case made out for challenge of that acquittal. And they used to be at the mercy of the state. Supposing the state wants to file an appeal, it will file. If it doesn't want to file, it will not file. And it may not give you adequate reasons why they are doing what they are doing. That is why the legislature in its wisdom now in 2008 has created this proviso, has created the definition of the word victim. Now, independent of the state, remember, independent of the state, the victim, police case. Now, I am emphasizing on police cases. If you look at three possibilities or the three situations, if you go back to 372, there are three situations in which these appeals can be filed. So the proviso has carved out three situations. Now, if you look at it from this perspective, that if there are, let us say there are two appeals. So supposing in an acquittal, there may be two appeals, one filed by the victim and the other filed by the public prosecutor. Is it not possible? The answer is certainly yes. There can be two appeals, one filed by the victim, and we know in what for what that victim will file the appeal, and we also know what are the limitations of the state appeal against an acquittal. In case of a victim who feels that a conviction by Sessions Court should have been under murder and not culpable homicide, now what is this? This is lesser offense. So imagine that there is a victim who feels that the conviction by the Sessions Court should have been under murder, okay, which is a serious offense or graver offense, but it is actually the conviction is for culpable homicide. He may file a separate appeal in the High Court. Now I'm talking about Sessions Court. So obviously, where should you file it? In the next higher court, which is the High Court. The second example. Now these are examples. These three things, two things that I'm giving you are examples. The second example is in case of a victim who feels aggrieved by acquittal of a magistrate, he may approach Sessions Court appeal. Okay, so this takes care of acquittal. We have three things. One is acquittal, one is conviction for lesser offense, and third is what? Inadequacy of sentence. Okay, sorry, inadequacy of compensation. So that example is here. Let us say there is a case of a sexual offense where the victim girl is aggrieved by the amount of compensation she can file. By the amount of compensation, she can file an appeal in the category of victim for increasing of the compensation. So here is a question of inadequacy of compensation, and the victim girl can certainly file a separate appeal for increase of the compensation. Now a very interesting question arises. What happens in a complaint case? So we have seen 378(4). We know that in a complaint case, what is the procedure for filing an appeal against acquittal? One has to file an appeal against acquittal only in the High Court and only with the leave of the court. So in this situation, can two separate appeals be filed by the complainant who is also the victim? Now see, this is a very difficult situation. What can happen is, because the victim can also be a complainant, technically the person who is the complainant can wear the clothes of a complainant and go under 378(4) and file an appeal. He can then change those clothes and wear the clothes of a victim and go and file a case in the superior court, which is the next superior court in a magistrate court, for example, would be the sessions court. So you have a situation where the same person, the same individual posing as the victim or being in the category of a victim, files a case in one forum and he files a case as the complainant in another forum. Now what happens in this situation? This is a gray area of law, and whatever research I have done, at least 3 courts have referred this issue to the larger bench. So this is a I wouldn't say an anomaly, but this is a situation which needs to be addressed by the Supreme Court, and a clear pronunciation of law has to be evolved. Now the second issue that arises is normally whether an appeal in the High Court by victim against acquittal by Sessions Court requires leave to file appeal. See, normally we see that a leave to file appeal is there. State appeals require leave to file appeal, or in a private case, instead of a complainant, you need to file, or there's a requirement of filing a leave to file appeal or a permission to be sought from the High Court. Now, does it apply also to an appeal by a victim? Fortunately for us, this issue has been laid to rest by a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court in the case of Mallikarjun Kodagali. This is a 3-judge bench. It's not exactly a constitutional bench. It's a 3-judge bench, which is so this judgment I have set out, I have written it down. Mallikarjun Kodagali, represented through legal representatives versus State of Karnataka and others, 2019 to SCC 752. Where it is observed by the majority bench, there was a dissenting view in this, so it was a 2:1 ratio, that the leave of the court is not required. So finally, because there was also a lot of gray area on this, so finally in 2019 that issue is now resolved and it is no longer res integra. So I think, yes, 6:45. So it's been 45 minutes. If I had started off with revision, it would have taken probably another another hour. So I have restricted myself. So now I have got some questions which I am trying to answer. Sir, can you please give practical examples, that is cases in respect of provisions? I think I have given them. In the case of 138, the accused is acquitted. My question is why the complainant appeal in the High Court? It may be appeal in Sessions Court. Please read 378.4. Oh, somebody has replied to him. Great. So read 378.4. Great. So that is the answer. If a victim files appeal under 372 proviso, would a victim's counsel argue the appeal, or would the public prosecutor prosecute the appeal? No, obviously the victim's counsel will argue it, because he is filing, the victim is filing it, no? So his lawyer will argue it. I think only 3 queries are there. So Devendra, if there are no queries, then can we wind up? Or somebody else wants to ask?
Someone has any questions? They can put up in the chat box.
Does applying for anticipatory bail direct a doubt of investigation agency towards the appellant? This question is not very clear, my friend. I didn't get what you're trying to say. Because we are talking about appeals, so I am really wondering where does anticipatory bail come from?
No more questions, so we can. Okay.
Can we have a summary of the PPT? Why do this? A summary I'll try to sort of send to Siddharth so it can be shared with everyone. Why do they say revisional jurisdiction is a discretionary right when statute provides a right to file revision? Okay, so for that you'll have to wait for my revision lecture, and but it's an interesting point. A revision is maintainable against orders which are revisable. Okay, so you have interim orders, you have intermediate orders, and you have final orders. Only the final orders are revisable, but that is under 397, and it will require one more, probably 45 minutes of talk, and we'll need to go through the case laws and all that. We're not allowed to appeal against inadequacy of sentence. Because the state, because there can't be overlapping. If you look at 377, if I'm not wrong, then the state has been given that domain of appealing for inadequacy of sentence. So therefore, in its wisdom, the legislature has not sort of allowed it for the victim. Otherwise, there would be chaos. Even the victim will appeal against inadequacy of sentence. Even the state will do the same thing. So the victim is restricted to inadequacy of compensation or lesser offense. Any other question? What happens in appeal against acquittal in POCSO matters? Would double presumption of innocence apply? Yes, but then see, POCSO is a different proposition because there are inherent. So, if you get an acquittal in a POCSO case, that itself sets the presumption twofold, because there is a presumption of law and a presumption of innocence. So, you are overcoming both and getting an acquittal. If you, yes, so section 29. Correct. So 29 of POCSO clearly is a presumption. It's the legal presumption or statutory presumption, and you are overcoming section 29. Plus, you are overcoming the presumption of innocence, and you are getting a acquittal. So it would. So the question that you are asking is, would presumption apply again in appeal? No, 29 will not apply in appeal. You will have, so it is not. So I got what you're asking. What you're trying to say is, would again you will have to encounter 29 and rebut it? The answer is no, because already you have done it in the trial court. Is appeal allowed in a special act if the imprisonment is less than 3 years? Appeal is always allowed. There is no question. I think the questions are over.
Okay.
Thank you so much, all of you.
To conclude our webinar here. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us on today's topic. It was indeed a very informative session for all of us. We are looking forward to have many more sessions by you in the near future. And I would also like to thank all the participants, those who have joined. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.